So I was at the store the other day when I walked by the jewelry section and noticed that everything with a diamond on it cost more than my car. Like a normal person, I immediately asked myself, how can I use this to get absurdly, ridiculously, obscenely rich? Well, I know diamonds are made of carbon, which has the elemental abbreviation C. Can't place where I've heard of that before. So if you somehow don't know, carbon is emitted upon the burning of fossil fuels. It's in the form of CO2, which means it's double bonded to two oxygen atoms. Now, diamonds are made of basically pure carbon, which means I'm going to have to get rid of those oxygen molecules. Unfortunately for me, CO2 molecules are the antithesis of all Twitter users. Stable. They're hard to break apart because they really like being the way they are. But I'm getting ahead of myself. We have another problem to deal with first. How do we transport the CO2 or even get it out of the air? It's spread throughout the atmosphere and is rather difficult to separate. Luckily, some people who are really into greenhouses figured this out for me. We have to go to the major outlets of CO2 emissions to filter it off, where the concentration is greater. This will greatly increase the efficiency of the operation, and thus the speed at which my money pile grows. The process that we're going to use is carbon sequestration. We'll use a carbon dioxide scrubber, which is currently the only commercially viable process. The following is fully detailed to increase the forewarden's watch time. First, we make a honeycomb lattice to get maximum surface area contact with the air. We drip a solution of sodium hydroxide through the honeycomb, which bonds to CO2 to form a byproduct of water and a main product of chemical name I can't pronounce. We then mix that with a calcium double hydroxide chemical, I really hope that's how you read that, to get calcium carbonate and the sodium hydroxide back to run it through the honeycomb again. In calcium carbonate form, it's very easy to move the CO2, and we can ship it wherever the diamond production will take place. We then perform causticization, which I won't explain because I don't know how it works. Then, we can heat the calcium carbonate in a chamber to separate the CO2 from the other junk, which can then have water added to be reused. The chamber will then collect the CO2 for further refinement. We now have the CO2 captured and separated from the atmosphere. So, where to from here? As I mentioned earlier, we have to separate the oxygen molecules from the carbon molecules if we want to turn them into diamonds so I can throw them on the money pile. And this was where the problems really began. 3 hours of searching later, and I've still got no clue how to do this. As near as I can tell, the reason is that it's not really an easy reaction. Most of the methods for separating them seem to require high temperatures and are inefficient. Of course, there is the alternative, which is I'm just too stupid to use Google effectively. It's probably that. Anyways, I searched for a long time and found nothing. I scoured the pits of the internet, swam the ocean floors, walked infinite plains of data, climbed mountains of information, and nothing. But as a wise man once said, if at first you don't succeed, it's probably because you're an imbecile. I looked harder, and I found an article from 2019 detailing a method of separating the CO2 molecules into their base elements at a low temperature and cost threshold. Their idea was that this could be used to store the CO2 as carbon to keep it out of the atmosphere and aid in stopping climate change to save humanity from the horrors of increasingly high temperatures and severe weather events. But I'm going to repurpose their good intentions to make bank! Now, you audience members being a bunch of curious little guys, you probably want to know how this method of carbon separation works. Well, I've read the article, and to put it simply, it's so complex I can't even understand parts of it. Despite that, I'll try and explain it to you, even at the expense of my watch time. An alloy called gallium, which is a eutectic mixture of gallium, indium, and tin, is the primary part of this process. Eutectic means that the elements combined have a lower melting point than the constituents. Because of this, the metal has a melting point of -2 degrees Fahrenheit. The gallium has finely ground cerium added to it for reasons beyond me. Then, an electrical charge is run through it, and the CO2 is bubbled through the liquid metal. This produces raw carbon flakes in the form of amorphous carbon, meaning it lacks a definite repeating structures. Now, that's actually a bit problematic, because the form of carbon used in artificial diamond production is graphite, which has a definite structure. However, it is still very similar, and under the pressures and heat present during artificial diamond synthesis, I think it would work. For no reason, of course, except it being true, because I'm a good YouTuber who puts effort into his videos, and I would never lie to you to get out of extra work. So now we finally have amorphous carbon sheets to work with. Artificial diamond synthesis could have an hour-long video made on it, but long story short, it focuses largely on replicating the conditions under which natural diamonds form. Natural diamonds are formed deep in the Earth's crust under high heat and pressure. These sorts of conditions are easy to replicate in the post-industrial revolution world, and the process from here is relatively child's play. Basically, you place the carbon in a press and heat it to about 2,600 degrees Fahrenheit. You then put it under a moderate pressure of just, 5 gigapascals, which, to put it in more human terms, is like carrying 2 cars on your back. Now that I've proven this is technically possible, I'll take some questions. Isn't this kind of missing the point of solving climate change, Forward? Isn't it about saving the Earth, letting a new generation inherit a better world than the one we live in today, and fixing the ecosystem? Aren't we all here to leave a better world for our children? I mean, are you really going to commit good acts just out of corporate greed instead of for the good of all humanity? Is that really what this is for? Yes. Forward, isn't that kind of dumb? Aren't there many ways you could do this to make it more profitable? Heck, isn't any other method of getting money better? Keep asking questions like that, and you're going to get the villager treatment.
Hmm.
This is actually a good place to talk about the profits this would produce. One of the issues that came up right away was that the researchers on the liquid metal part didn't seem to include the amount of carbon produced per run or any of the possible economics of this transformation. However, I can total all the resources used in a single run and find the costs of each to get a sort of estimated profit. Well, first off, gallon stand is really expensive. It's about $1,000 per pound. You also need cerium powder at about 3% of the weight of the gallon stand, which is another $60. I'm only doing the numbers for a single run, so a pound should be enough. It's worth mentioning that all the components of this can be used multiple times, so this becomes more and more profitable the more runs you do. As for the carbon sequestration part, you can't really sequester a whole lot without building a big factory. I won't include the cost of the actual manufacture of the buildings in this scenario, but they're expensive. Estimates say that carbon capture costs approximately $175 a ton. That's obviously a lot more than we need. This makes the CO2 itself cheap, though the infrastructure might not be. The CO2 cost is actually well below $1 per pound, so that's nice. This means that it's going to cost about $1,100 to transform CO2 into carbon. Only about 27% of the weight of a CO2 molecule is carbon, so we'll only end up with about a quarter of a pound. That's enough to put into a press to make into diamonds. The actual cost of diamonds fluctuates greatly, but can be anywhere from $1,000 per carat to tens of thousands. We can say that 80% of this is probably the cost of production. Now, I'm stupid, so any of this could be wrong, and there are some things I didn't factor into the cost analysis. But if the diamonds this makes are high quality, and if I'm right, that would imply that this is actually economically feasible. I think Viagra just lost a customer. Yeah, I want to pop this in at the end. I put a lot of effort into this. I haven't even done the editing yet as I was recording this, and I've put like 12, 13 hours into this video, so sounds kind of cringe and maybe a little basic or something, but I think maybe the 13 hours might justify maybe like clicking a small button. 13 hours for me, you clicking small red, actually it's black now, clicking a small black button. That doesn't seem that hard, right? Right? Maybe that's a fair trade. Probably just do that. Right? Yeah, do it.